I already said it was cold in here.
Welcome back. It's cold.
Welcome back. It's cold in here.
It's cold in here.
You said get a warmer shirt.
I said get a warmer shirt. This is.
I want a fireplace.
Fireplace?
Yeah, I want a fire right here.
That'd be nice.
Fireside chats.
Feels very homey. All right. Well, hopefully y'all enjoyed last episode. I think we had a lot of fun talking about a whole bunch of random stuff. It's really hard for me
went off
to.
track.
It's really hard for me to come up with the titles of the episodes for YouTube and for our podcast networks.
The last one that we did, there was something we said, I was about to say that should be the title of this. I'm reading this book right now on the crazies. I already finished it. It's a spectacular read. And it's about what we were talking. At break, we talked politics and all kinds of stupid shit that dumbass doesn't listen to me. But I'm working on him.
I think he calls his dog dumbass too.
Yes,
so, yeah.
Everybody. Never Mel. But in there's a title. And I kept thinking, immediately thought about this thing. And it's a shit for brains. And it's this whole thing about all these super billionaires over in the crazies buying up the world, and they always have to have it as their legacy for their dumbass kids that are going to be worthless anyway. And so, but I'm thinking, shit for brains. And it goes in there, it's a quote from Russell Gordy, one of the richest guys. I think it was from Russell Gordy. He's one of the giant guys over there. He might be a super nice guy, I was kind of whoever, but he worked his way through it, and good for him, but he has a quote in there. And it says, if you have luck on your side, you can have shit for brains. I mean, I had to keep reading. I don't like to race forward. I never go into the end of books, right? I want to so badly, especially on that one. I want to see the little guy win. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, there's got to be something about this. And we were talking about something about bad etiquette. And I thought, well, that'd be a great title for this.
Brains, yeah.
Shit for brains.
My dad calls me.
Yeah, we've talked about it before.
Others, I think.
Your dad?
Yeah. Coming up with titles is tough because we kind of, we have an idea of where we want to start, and then we just kind of go through. But the comments.
It goes crazy.
The comments help keep us mildly organized, at least for a start. So, we talked about the drunk and disorderly for a good hour last time. And we have nothing on the table this time, but this show is also brought to you by slidin.com. Go buy something. You might like it.
Buy extra. Buy one for your girlfriend. Don't tell your wife.
That should be our slogan. All right, so I wanted to bring up a question on our YouTube channel from nrussell11. He said, would love a prep episode for streamer fishing runoff. I fish a canyon section of the Arkansas River in Colorado.
I was just down there last week. I wasn't there. I was down close to it.
I've had some great days streamer fishing runoff, but tend to struggle with consistency. River basin is a deep V-cut shape, so it's tough to fish with sinking lines from the bank when the fish are 6 to 24 inches off the bank. Maybe a comparison of runoff techniques for boat versus wade anglers. I think this is a great question. I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And Russell has a huge step up on a lot of anglers in that he understands where the fish are during runoff, that they are glued to the bank. They can be there all year long, not only in runoff. I think especially in runoff, it pushes them out. But I think that's a big step in the right direction, is understanding that those fish are on the bank. So what would you have to say to Mr. N. Russell?
Well, gorges are, ravines like that, those that just pump so much water, it's a toughie. I mean, you get a lot of dislodgement. But first he said with a sinking line, so understand, we've talked about that before. We don't usually, I don't at least, in particular in the spring, in particular when you have high water, I get asked that constantly. Understand, you already hit it right, like you said, he's got it dialed already. Those fish are banked out and they're looking for shelter. They can't run that treadmill out in the middle, and that's 10 times a treadmill. I mean, runoff is runoff everywhere. and it forces fish to the edge. It forces them to hiding spots. And there in particular, I mean, it's like, here, stepping into this shit. You don't get it, can't see. You'd be stupid to get out in that stuff. I mean, here, it does the same thing, but not nearly like there with that, because the rock walls and keeping everything, it'd be like being down the bear trap doing that. So understanding that it really helps you in one respect, that it condenses your fish to the edge. Mm-hmm. We talk about this a lot here, about the best fishing, the time of year. You come here and Runoff into the Madison River, and you will have access, if you're lucky, in a 2-mile section of water, maybe a mile, you'll be lucky to have 2 spots you can fish. But you'll also be lucky because 80% of the fish have been condensed into those 2 spots.
You might be able to walk on them.
People do not believe. The first 11 years I lived in this state, I never saw an angler in Runoff once in my life. Not one person. And this is and I don't really dig the whole number world thing, but when you're going to have, and particularly guiding, like we guide it when it's giant, and we'll float it. We'll float down and get out and fish 2 runs all day. It is absolutely nothing to have a run that normally would have, or even just like out back here at the boat launch, which has got a great deflector that keeps that one back pool when there's hot water.
Rocks.
Yeah, it's just, there's no current. If that pool normally has 30 fish in it, during an extra 4,000 CFS, it will have 300 to 500 fish in it. Every fish in the peripheral zone within hundreds of yards has to seek shelter somewhere. In a gorge in particular, you may quadruple, you may go up 20-fold how many fish got to live there. Right. Because it's where they have to be. Yep. Down just above the bridge, just there, just at Marigold. It's nothing. I've been in that, sat in that hole by myself, and in really quite comfortable water, because it's what it has to be. They have to find that. So, and have maybe, like you say, it's hard telling in some of them. If you get there and it's clear, you can see it, but that's pretty rare. But if I'm going to have, with 2 customers, if you're going to have a true 100 fish day, it'll always be in that water, because the fish don't leave. They recycle. There's so many. There's times when you can go through those runs and you can just feel your line just going off fish, right?
Hidden fins.
Yeah, well, you're trying not to, you don't want to, because it's just fish, yeah. Right? And so that part makes it, and remember, you're looking for a specific style of water in the spring. It doesn't matter where you fish either. It's holding water. There's dislodgement from every insect in that river's getting dislodged all the way up and down the river. So it's not like, but they have to have one where the water's coming down. It'll always be next to fast water too. You'll have an eddy there. You'll have something that allows the fish to rest and still get to the food, because understand that spring runoff is green grass. It's the same as green grass is to elk. In the spring, those fish have been hyperphagic. Maybe you got midges, maybe you don't. So they've got some food, but now everything's coming at them. And they're on a super active feed. When I was saying how I never used to see anybody fish here, the TU club in Bozeman asked me to do a seminar. And I did a thing on fishing the mud, because we get mud, right? Can't see an inch. Trout do not need their eyes. They can feel in 5,000 C. If it's 700 right now and it's running 4,000 in a month and a half or so, and it's totally chocolate milk, and they're feeding on size 20 betas and midges. And I heard it 1,000 times, I guarantee you. Well, they can't see down there. No, they don't have to. You can blind a trout. They work off their lateral line, and they can tell, they can feel the things moving. It's just beyond our pea brains thinking that they have to see it. But you'll have this hugely condensed area of fish. And so the next thing, when you find it, remember that it's going to be a distinct difference between the rest of the river. Reading the water is critical. And so you'll see this zone where you can see it, and particularly you want it to have a fast lane by it, because if there is any, that just brings more food. But they have to rest. And then you said with a sinking line. Now, I seldom fish a sinking line in big water because I'm going to be fishing upstream probably. And so, and remember, the fish are condensed and they're not going to be in deep water because that water is going to be moving. And so the water is going to be particularly shallow. They're hyperphagic. They're coming off of a big winter. They're looking for things to eat, or feeling for things to eat would be more adequate or more appropriate, I mean, because they don't have to see it. They'll feel that fly moving through the water, and they're going to come and get it. And so you look for the water that is, first of all, that you say to yourself, oh, I could relax out there. Maybe you can even wade out in a little bit, right? And then maybe, I've done a lot of stuff on this in past ones and videos, but fish a dry line and just use a cone head or whatever, Carolina rig it, put a swivel above your fly, do anything like that, but don't worry so much about trying to get deep, and don't try to control more than you can. So if you find that soft water, fish upstream to it, because you're going to find these pools. Once you learn these pools, and that's a good thing to find as the river's coming up, not necessarily once it's raging, but once you find it, realize you're going to have, you've condensed your fish. So maybe you have a mile of river that used to have, 3,000 fish per mile or whatever it is, and now you've condensed that into 4 runs. That's all you have to, you don't have to look any further. You don't have to be trying to kill yourself out. You don't wade out past your knee. I don't go ever past my knees in this thing. But in runoff, shit, I barely get off the bank, truly.
Yeah, you keep your feet dry.
Yeah.
Fishing this 5 feet closest.
Especially when it's, I thought I knew this river pretty much as well as anybody, especially this upper 10 miles. And runoff will get here, and I'll get cocky and think, well, I'll just and I'll be 3 foot in the wrong direction up to my dallywhacker going, I'm going to die out here because shit's going to go south in a hurry, right? And so basically what it tells you is that find the water, don't worry about being deep because they're not deep, and they usually the water's off color and they're chasing vibration. And remember that they are really, this is when spring is spring for every creature on earth. Green grass for elk, bugs flowing down the river and dislodgement and all kinds of stuff's coming. You got young of the year, you got last fall, you got last spring's rainbows, which are about that long, and you got all those little swim ups from your brown trout that are, hardly even out yet. And so there's a lot of food, and it's just nature's way. Any discarded eggs are coming down. It's a cornucopia of junk just coming. If you ever kill a fish, you want to see just a smorgasbord. You kill a spring fish. In the old days when we killed them or kept them and ate them, we'd eat these things and we'd always check the stomachs. You get a high back in Michigan, a lot of detriments, a lot of bark and shit like that, and you open a fish and there'll be 50 bugs of some sort. There'll be an egg from something, and there'll be a handful of bark. They just eat everything that goes by, right? And it's like, if it doesn't offend them, they just swallow it and shit it out. It's not like they go, oh, I'm not eating that. It's got a speck of dirt on it. They eat anything, right? And so it makes it for the spring angler super easy. I like to do, I don't just go giant flies either, because you've got so much of that young of the year. You have so many, because you really have your brown trout, your spring fish, when I think I said that backwards. Your spring fish have got, your swim ups and your elvin, and then last year's class fish, and then your brown trout, that fish is still very small. It's just, it had 5 months, 6 months to incubate and come up and, be little minnows. But there's a lot of that. If you've got whitefish, you've got all of those juvies. But you've always got you've always got really 3 cycles of minnows, anywhere from swim up or even elvin at some places, and to your fish that are like this. And so you've got just an unbelievable amount of food base, and those fish aren't nearly, and by the way, most of those are schoolies when they're little like that. They group in schools, and so if the river's raging crazy and you're out there trying to wade in the son of a bitch, imagine what that minnow that big's doing. They're grouping up together and they're getting in little clusters and they're staying by the bank and all of a sudden they get, and you'll see that. You'll see a little cluster of minnows get blown. It's so cool. They just destroy those things, go through them all at once. And so you really have a big advantage in the spring once you take the thought of wading the river, out of that equation and get into an understanding that there's a lot of food in a very small amount of area. When you find those areas, mark them. And in the summer, look at those. Especially when the water clears, go look for those big holding zones. Look for where the river's just hauling ass out here, but it's really not doing much over here. That's your payday every time. I don't care where you are. I don't care what country, what state. It will always be the same. They've got to have resting water.
Do you think your tactics change in terms of types of retrieves and speeds of retrieves when fishing that kind of water?
Yeah, in particular, I'm upstreaming a lot because, you don't have the ability to get out in the river to fish back to the bank. You don't have the ability to get anywhere near the river and what river he's talking about or here.
So is the reason you do that to be able to have a longer retrieve distance?
The upstream?
Yeah. Because otherwise you'd only be casting, 5 feet out?
I mean, but even so, we seldom fish, and I'm going to throw 30-foot max. Right. And we've had other videos about this, about just that retrieve. But in a spring condition like that, I'm going to be fishing straight upstream. And the problem with, even in slow water, is controlling the fly all the way through your retrieve. Mm-hmm. And so don't really try to do that. If I could throw a 30-foot cast and get 20 foot, it was slow enough to do, I'm going to do it. But general rule of thumb for me is I'm going to have control of about 8 to 10 feet of my retrieve, and I'm going to lose it. And so what I do is I run bank first, and I'm sure we've got a video about this somewhere out there, or another podcast.
We'll do one this year.
But I do, like I said, 30-foot cast is a big one. 20 is probably more like it. And so I'm going to go right to the bank. I'm going to be 6 inches from the bank, and then I move out 2 foot. So I go 6 inches from the bank, out 2 feet, out 2 more. And so I cover 6 foot of the inside, and then I look peripherally, I look straight across the river if there's anything that I can throw out and come back at myself. So if I'm straight down or straight upstream, closest to bank, 2 foot out, 2 foot more, and I retrieve about 8 feet. If you can control it all the way, great, but usually you run out of control about 8, 10 feet back. And then I look over here to looking upstream, I'm on river left, lookers left. I'm going to go across stream, but then I move up the same distance. So I move up 8 feet or so, whatever I retrieved, and start the sequence over, but just gridding it 1, 2, 3, and then look over here. And if I can get it to come across, but you're in a canyon, and what the discussion was, you're not going to have a cross stream much. You might roll it out there, but most of it's going to be upstream. And I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to have some smaller, which seems counterintuitive because you're going to have dirty water, but I'm going to have some bait fish stuff that's 3 inches or less always in my repertoire, because if they get a bunch of juvie and they get on those things, it's one of the few times you can pick a fish up and see they'll spit out minnows. And so don't go with just your giant thinking that, remember, they can feel a 20 mayflies swimming through that water. It just is ridiculous. You don't have to have something giant to get their attention. And if they're not on it, they're not on it.
What would a couple of patterns that you like for spring be? Especially because you mentioned you don't need giant flies.
I never fish without a barely legal. Period, end of discussion. I never fish without a peanut envy, full size or mid size, either one, because I always want more than just a minnow imitation. But what colors do you like in those two in the spring? I like
do you
to
think
match
color matters as much in really dirty water?
I do. I like to match the color. The dirtier the water, the darker it is. But glacial water, if it's greenish, I don't mind so much having more white stuff. or lighter, but I like to follow it's just a rule of thumb. I follow the watercolor to start with, but I don't hold, as you know.
Change pretty quick.
But a good minnow pattern, and again, it's one that I can fish upstream. And now particularly, I have no problem fishing, which you've seen, like a conehead woolly sculpin or any of the single hook flies, because if it's really fast, you can have the articulated flies can have a tendency to get their ash pushed at you, and you really never straighten that fly out. No matter what you do, other than the hit in the first one or two movements, if it's too fast, it'll fold that fly over. I've never tried that intruder that you fish all the time, that Montana intruder. Flies it, but I do tend to fish. I still like a boogeyman in that. But again, if it's really ripping and you're looking for water that's not ripping, but you're always going to have, there's going to be one of these. You're never going to find a soft spot. You're going to find kind of. But I tend to not. I see a lot of people just throwing giant flies early, and they'll eat them, but I think it's usually a little more productive to be in that 3-inch fly than it is a 5-inch fly. And lower profile, because most of your stuff there aren't seeing is giant profile.
Did you mention the smoke wagon yet?
No, I didn't. Well, I was getting at it, but I said, so the smoke wagon is a single hook fly.
Sorry, let me
which
mess with your mic one more time.
Which I frequently don't like when men touch my clothing. Joel did that before.
Sorry.
Try that one.
I don't like when your mic scrapes. Now our listeners are the ones who...
You're welcome. So back to our flies. Single hook flies, a zoo cougar, woolly sculpin, or for that matter, woolly bugger's pretty good. Like a number 2 woolly bugger can be really good too. They're opportunistic. They are putting on a feed bag. They're not detailing quite like they might in the summer.
Right.
When they're looking for a specific, they've seen a bunch of it. And so they're putting on a feed bag. Doesn't mean I don't take big flies with me. I do. And I always start with a white boogeyman in the mornings. It's just a habit of mine. And to see if they'll cook. But you can go to a mini boogie and be just fine. It's a great little bait fish.
Yeah.
And there's obviously, because of the multi-brooding and just how sculpin are in the river, there's always multiple sizes. And so, sculpin have a very undeveloped swim bladder. So they get dislodged, they're toast. they're rolling. They don't do well in that water. So you will see a lot of sculpin and fish bellies in the spring. And so never leave. And that's why the woolly sculpin, a conehead woolly sculpin, just in like a 4 or 2, it's a good little sculpin. It's a minnow pattern in the right color, white. It's just a woolly bugger with a hair head, and a cone. Yeah. And I use a lot of cones in the spring. And if you don't have a cone, run a 3/16 tungsten bead down your leader and you'll be just fine. And, you don't have to fish deep. You don't have to, 10 inches is plenty, 6 really. I mean, they're going to be in less than 3 foot of water for the most part. And they're going to be a lot of them. So, trying to worry about the depth game, getting way deep on them, that's just counterintuitive to the fish's behavior. They're moving to their food. They're not setting up and sitting and waiting so much as they would be once the water's lower and clearer.
Right.
That's my 2 cents. Plus a nickel.
So we did flies, kind of retrieve styles, and where to find those fish.
Water. Mm-hmm.
I think if you want to catch a lot of fish, nymph.
Oh, I thought it was a straight up.
No, it was. But
absolutely, we don't. When I said I'm going to look for 100 fish, it sure shit isn't with a streamer.
No, it's not.
I mean, I thought that was a straight up streamer question. No, I'm going to be nymphing, and you couldn't make me nymph in the spring without an egg pattern. That is the food source. And I'll get a lot of guys, yeah, you piece of shit. It is what's on the menu. Those fish are eating eggs. I fished caddis. Midge and caddis are my go-to. when I get my ass kicked, I put on an egg and lights out. And little ones. I don't like pegging.
See, Jeremy put me on what's your bug, the warbird.
Warbird?
Yeah.
Yeah, warbirds.
It's a killer spring pattern, especially.
Well, if you've got, especially where he's talking
kind of a
about, they got
streamer.
salmon flies like crazy.
Yeah.
The warbird, look it up. It's a bug I did 30 years ago. It's nothing more than a woolly bugger with legs and antenna. The antenna are critical.
So it's got rubber legs that come outside.
It's just it's a woolly bugger with rubber legs, but it's got antenna, and it can be really deadly.
I had a lot
and
of
I
fun
particularly like that in dark brown.
Yeah.
I like that brown one. Black one's great too, but and again, it's somewhat of a hatch matching thing, but because we always talk about dislodgement and bugs and stuff like that, right? Well, it's kind of a crock. They're pretty good at holding on. Now you got bio drift where they drift to reposition and stuff like that. But in the spring, when you stand out in this river, in some ways it's a little spooky, and you'll hear, it's a freaking boulder coming down the river. And you can feel it. It's like another reason not to be out there. But when you hear one of those things just make that noise, that's dislodgement. Yes. When a freaking boulder can move, and then you'll see like a log go.
Pounds.
Yeah, 100, maybe 500, some of those giant ones, maybe more. And then you'll see a freaking log come down, bounce up, and you can see its root section down here. It's like, that's dislodgement. Everything on Earth is coming down the river.
I mean, that power is incredible. I remember standing out here at the boat ramp, nymphing it during Runoff my first year. And, it went from, that was giant years, the year all the bridges blew out. And
it's great.
On the Yellowstone.
Unbelievable fishing.
So good.
Wasn't great for the bridges.
No, it wasn't great for the bridges, nor the houses.
No.
But
that was a trap.
I remember standing out here at the boat ramp, and we're just roping them. All of a sudden,
Stupid.
Maybe a 30-foot log that's that large rockets past us down the side channel.
Yeah, still in there.
Is it still in there?
It's still in there. There's a beaver dam built off of it now.
Oh.
It lodged between those two trees, and it's still
Down
in there.
closer to you.
Right in front of my house.
Yeah, okay, yep. I was wondering if that's what it was. But yeah, I mean, it went through, I couldn't believe the speed at which it flew through there.
Well, not only the side channel, which is usually 16 to 18 inches deep, was 5 foot deep.
There's a lot.
And you could have surfed that friggin'
Didn't it
drop.
top the gauges that year?
I don't know.
I feel like I remember that we didn't know what it was at because it topped out at 4K.
Yeah, I think it was huge.
Huge.
But it tells you that nothing's off the menu at that point, because one rock tips over. I don't care what kind of bug it is. If it's a clinger, I don't care what it's doing. When a whole weed bed gets washed out, every bug in it goes with it, and especially, in the slower areas when they're not used to that, and all of a sudden you get a 2,000 or 3,000 CFS, where he's talking about, that's a gorge. I mean, that
water goes straight
that's a
up.
vertical rise thing. Yeah, which would be even harder to find them. But I still say I think in the hunt for the white whale when we did, that was the first question, was favorite time of year. And everybody wants to fish fall. And I remember saying that when you're going to get your giant, it's usually in the spring.
Do you think it's because those fish are more likely to eat in spring coming off winter?
I think that's a big part of it. I think, again, spring is spring for everything.
Yeah.
Food base is there. Nature has found a way to make sure everybody gets happy in the spring. If you made it through the winter, here comes a whole bunch of food your way to make it through. Particularly big carnivores need a lot. And so it really, from an angling perspective, given that you don't take your life in your own hands and you study your rivers and you identify water, read your water, and you do it in advance, if you're a little room temp IQ like me, you take notes. I don't remember. Johnny remembers every run on every river verbatim. It's frightening. I can't. But if I go searching rivers, in particular like on the Yellowstone, which really goes up, I study those areas. Where will I likely find a shelter zone for one of those giant fish, or the moe? Moe doesn't color up as much, doesn't get as big because of the dams, but the lower Henry's Fork, some of those, you pay attention and you set your goal to be there when the water's a certain level, knowing that they're going to hold in that water, and that's your best shot. And so, and you go through there when everything's optimal and you get a better shot at that fish that may not be there, maybe anywhere in the river in 2 weeks. It may be 5 miles from there. You don't know.
Right.
But it's going to find shelter, and they still have to feed, right? And so in the gorge, you probably know, what was his name? I forget. In the gorge.
And Russell. Mr. Russell.
Let's go with
maybe Mrs. Russell.
Norman Russell.
Yeah, Norman.
Whatever.
Daniel?
Normie. So, but when you do that in the spring, you've just got a really good chance at, and it maybe even be multiples too. That's not real common to find giants and multiples, but you do get a better chance at finding a fish because they're not going to be out in the big water.
Right.
And so it just condenses not only your piss ants, but your real fish. And so, but in that gorge, I'm guessing where you're at, if you find, in a mile, if you find 3 holding zones, you'll be lucky because of the steep and all the walls and shit.
Walls.
But you're going to find real fish when you find that.
Yeah.
And it's the same in every river in the world. And so, and pay particular attention to your insides. Don't walk past those insides because they truly may double up on those. There's only a couple runs I can think of where they just happen to have really great shelter zones, but that if they're not on like rock pile or something that just drives them, if they're not, the insides are where, like the boat launch.
Yeah.
Doesn't take much to create one either. 3-4 boulders, a big tree kicking it out, anything that eddies that water in a zone, anything that turns it around and makes it comfortable. It might be 3-4 foot, it might be a single boulder does it.
Yep.
But it will have a fish behind it or 5. And if you find those big zones, I would love to. I know that the one down below here, I know that I've been there in the spring and I could not conceive of how many fish I was looking at. The water's clear. They're still now they're kind of all over, and in the 500 to 1,000 zone because you walk and you just never quit seeing them.
Right.
And you got pre-spawners too. If you got rainbows, you got pre-spawners who are also feeding it up, and so, or post-spawn too. It depends on when it comes. But and we're like a freestone, but we're a tailwater. I mean, but our dam frequently doesn't work at all. So it's either wide open or shut off.
Yeah, we should probably do an episode on that.
Yeah, for the last few years, it's been pretty good. But that's all I got.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. I think they had a minor problem.
Lately, the dam?
Yeah, wasn't it last year, 2 years ago? It was stuck on 840 for.
I don't know. They're always.
I thought they were having somebody work on it and they couldn't move it for a while.
Oh yeah, they couldn't that was a few years ago.
Yeah. We'll probably do an episode on that at some point because I find that interesting. That was right before I moved out here, and I can't tell you how many calls I fielded. People were asking, "Are there still fish in the river?" And
Oh, you mean when it shut off?
Yeah. I caught a couple this morning. I'm pretty sure they're still here.
Yeah, yeah, it shut off completely. But
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. On another note, somebody messaged the Slide In on Instagram asking if we could reduce the time of these episodes to just under an hour.
I think he's got a good point.
Well, they're just about an hour.
I just need to
15
shut up.
No, he said it's because he goes to the gym, and he goes to the gym for a little less than an hour, and he
We
wants
got to
to
pick
listen
up.
to the whole episode.
We're doing this for your health.
Yes.
So
I was
just
like, why don't
spend
you
that
just
time on the treadmill.
Yeah, get on the stair stepper. For
Nothing
a little
is
longer.
more
You could do it.
boring on earth than a tread.
I can't do inside.
When I was
exercise.
bodybuilding, when you're getting down to that end and you got to cut, and you're doing anything you can. I'd rather take a caning than get on a freaking treadmill. I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. Oh, shit.
I had a friend
Just eat less food.
He ran a marathon on a treadmill in college just to see if he could do it. He wanted to test his.
Oh my God.
It's one of the most headstrong people I've ever met. I couldn't do it.
I have an elliptical now to trying to rehab my knee. That's the other one. I had the other one that's broke up, and oh my God. First of all, I got it and couldn't. Everything's set for 15-minute intervals. This is why they go over an hour, because I'm talking about dumbass shit. But it was like, I did that first one. It was 5 minutes. I was going to have a coronary. And then now I can do the 15, but I don't know which is worse. The 15's not so bad, but the boredom is like, oh my God.
You need a TV or something in front
I
of you.
have it. Still want to kill myself.
I don't know what to say. All right, so another question we got. This guy DM'd it to the slide in, or actually to my Instagram, which is a great way for me to see it because sometimes things fall through the cracks on the slide in one, given that there's a number of people looking at it.
For those of you who are waiting, I want you to see something. This is a Delta Wing Adams. It's 19. This fly I bought that fly, the original is behind me, and when I think I was 9. So in the 60s. I've never seen a Delta Wing Adams. You should try. I've never seen one. I tie them for myself a lot.
Pretty good fly. Why don't you get a close-up of that?
This is ready to get a close-up of something else too, don't forget. If you've never seen, in the old days we used to do these, we're just sidebarring while he's looking up. In the old days we used to do these, we'd parachute them off, we'd use the stem of that's what we wrapped our hackle around. I did this one with a little tiny post. I don't know, I was just sitting there looking at it, so I thought I'd get that out of the way.
I was trying to use it as
That's an awful picture.
It's great. We'll throw it in there. You guys are going to love it.
But it's really cool. It's just setting your wings back like this down it. This is one of my favorite searching patterns in the world. And I bought this in a pharmacy in Grayling, Michigan, and with my dad.
Flies?
Huh?
Pharmacy that sells flies?
And that's what they're in the old days. It was barbershops or
medicine in the world.
pharmacies. Yeah, there you go. They should have been
That's their slogan. You paid
that
for that
box, that preen box right there was, I bought it. I mean, I thought I was the richest guy in the world. Was my dad spoiling my ass? My older brothers remind me, my brothers are 5 and 7 years older. They got nothing. I think my mom had bought me 4 cars by the time I graduated. I wrecked them. We call her the Crabber. Crabber, I need a new car. My brothers want to beat my ass. You spoil little bitch. I was too.
Is that why you are the way you are?
Yeah, pretty much. But I bought that at a pharmacy, and not that one, the original up there, but they used to post, you'd take a stem, tie it up, stand it up, and then you'd wrap your hackle around the stem, like a thicker, base of another feather. I just do them with little posts. It's easier and a little more durable. Incredible searching fly. And if somebody, every time, you never know who you're talking to in these things. And somebody, I'm thinking that it probably is an OG because that fly I bought it right near where the Adams came from. But I wonder if there's any other ones like that. I've never seen them in the old books. I keep saying I'm going to bring more books into this. And because I love books. When I wrote my first book, John Randolph, the editor of Fly Fisherman, told me that I should go e-book. He was ahead of his time. And he said that, that book thing's a dinosaur. And I said, yeah, but you can't smell your computer. And it really bugs me. I love books. I don't know why people...
No, I like the books too.
I think it's Jerry Dennis's fault. He made me read. I never read a book cover to cover, skimmed every fishing book on the earth and every magazine. But I never read a book for pleasure. It was all for content. How can I be better than I was? And so then I started reading. I think I was 55 when I started reading, and it was like, holy shit. And I usually have 4 or 5 books going at a time. I gotta make up for lost time.
Yeah.
But then rereading and actually understanding what some of them say.
Yeah, reading comprehension's tough.
Yeah, well,
Reading's not so hard, although I'm going to struggle with it right here. So I got a question from SE Idaho Guy on Instagram. He sent me 4 messages. The first one was very long, and it said dictated, not proofread. And then he said dictating is terrible for accuracy. That he was in traffic and couldn't review, so then he put it into an even longer but more coherent message. So he said, I enjoyed the latest podcast on Big Browns, which focused heavily on the White River in Arkansas.
I just thought about my first, when you speak and spell shit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Kelly's the worst with it.
The first one I ever did, sending to my oldest daughter, Madison, we're having lunch. And I said, can't wait to see you tomorrow, Butterbutt, that's her nickname. And it said, and what it said, or BB, I don't remember which it was, and what it said was, can't wait to rub your inner thigh.
Oh my God.
How the hell do you get that out of, well, I don't know that it's not, I've never done it, right?
Yeah.
I just talked into the phone that one of the kids showed me this a long time ago. Madison's she's funnier and shit. She wrote back, I'm not sure that's appropriate. And then I read it and never used it again for like 10 years.
It's one of my favorite hobbies is every once in a while I'll be with, whatever, some of the shop guys or whoever, when I get a text from Kelly and I just start laughing and show it to them and go, anybody
got a
any
clue?
ideas what's going on?
Yeah, I read them later and go, I don't even remember what I was talking about.
That's, being in your car, I see it now where you use your car lady to talk to.
Oh yeah, that British chick.
Yes, and then it always reads it back to you, and it's really funny when it screws it up like pretty bad, and you go, good enough, they'll figure it out.
I think I've been told this, I mumble a lot, and I never finish a thought. Well, I do 2 or 3 sentences later, but.
Okay, on the topic of not finishing thoughts, we're going to try to do that and get back to this question from Southeast Idaho Guy. It says, I enjoyed the latest podcast on Big Browns, which focused heavily on the White River in Arkansas. Something you might want to consider on a regular basis. That's confusing. Discuss other waters in depth. Focus on the nature of the water, your experiences fishing the same, and techniques that have worked, not worked. I heard you mention in my area the Henry's Fork, South Fork of the Snake, also Yellowstone in Missouri. I wonder about regional fisheries, and then he names a bunch of other ones that I won't name. Go look at a map. Might even consider contrasting 2 at a time. So I want to kind of discuss and ask you about how to fish different styles of water, and we can use some of the popular ones around us as examples, but I don't want to be as specific to the water itself, more kind of the idea of the water, so it applies to all of our listeners.
I think everything he mentions is pretty open.
Yeah, well, there are some other ones in there that are still sort of secrets that I didn't mention. One of them, which we actually shot a show at,
and then canned,
and then decided not to put out. Which, whatever.
Small rivers should
stay.
They just stay. Small rivers. Find them. So.
Okay, so for Southeast Idaho Guy's question, I think that we should start by comparing the Madison to the Missouri, kind of how we change our tactics, where to find fish, kind of the same things we talked about on Runoff. But for those specific rivers. And because the Madison is a ton of different rivers in one, it changes about every 5 to 8 miles. Let's pick one section of the Madison and then compare that to one section of the Missouri, because you also do see a lot of different water up there too. So what sections do you want to compare and contrast?
I don't care. I mean, Craig's probably the most well-known section.
So let's do Craig on the Missouri, and then what about the Walk Wade up here?
Sure. Well, one's float river. You can wade either of them, but tend to do a lot more floating.
Let's target wading, just because I think that most of our viewers are probably out on foot most of the time.
I've only waded the mow a couple of times in that area. Hardly ever did, but Man, it's a tough one because they're just so completely opposite water types, right? And so,
We kind of explain those differences for those that may not know.
well, the Missouri as a whole up there is very placid. It's very, you don't have a lot of surface current. In some runs you'll have it in the rock walls and stuff like that, but overall it's pretty smooth. And then this river is called the 50-mile riffle for a reason. It just never stops doing that. And up here in particular, it's the highest gradient there is because you got Earthquake Lake where the 59 earthquake blocked the entire river. And so it's got a lot of gradient and descent. It's going downhill very quickly up here. And so as far as contrasting them, again, hard to say if you're nymph fishing, if you're dry fishing, but we'll just start nymphing. Nymphing wise, really hard. Like if you're a Euro cat, this river's made for you. If you're up on the walk section on the Mo, not so good. I mean, better have a bobber to run those because it's slower, deeper, don't have the bottom contrast that you would in some places. And so first thing you'd have to do in any river would be see what's your bottom? What is making, the bottom tells you what the surface is. The river's smooth on the top if the bottom's smooth, right? And so it's just whatever makes up the surfaces will be what is down below you. Hence this river being one of the best nymph rivers in the world. I mean, it's such a made to, I don't care how if you Euro, if you bobber, I don't care how you fish it, if you tight line, drop shot, I don't care how you fish it, this river's made for it because really short inspection times, right? You get on a Missouri River style, Henry's Fork, down below, you've got these smooth rivers that just don't let you be a raging bull coming into them. So you're going to first identify any river like that. Spring creeks, you don't get to be like that. You have to have more stealth. So that should dictate how you approach the river. Like if I'm going to go fish nymph the Missouri, I can guarantee you I'm either hopper dropper or I'm going to, more likely I'd have a straight up bobber. I mean, I would have a Oros bobber, and so I could adjust it a lot. I'm going to get much longer. I'm going to actually be able to run a run on the Missouri. Mm-hmm. Here, a run, pretty rare to find one that's 10 feet long without having it bust a boulder and go over and cut this way and just to give you a line. And so it's all about reading the water no matter what. And if I'm going to dry fly fish, so we're going to run the hatch, right? We're going to start in the morning. We're going to go out and nymph. So the first thing I'm going to do is identify, how you want to fish. I mean, if you're an anti-bobber and you're on the Missouri, you're going to have to drop shot. If the water's 3 foot, 4 foot deep, you're going to miss a lot of stuff because they're the edges of the weed beds. You can't quite get down. You can't get the drift. You got to identify what's your style, right? And how you're going to get there. And then you got to be practical as to if you're a Euro cat on that big it's going to be really tough. I mean, it's hard to lead. There's not enough current. They're just pushing, and you're right on top of everything on foot. And so first you got to figure out, like I said, what is your style? Do you have limitations? I mean, do you say, I wouldn't Euro fish if it was, goal. I wouldn't do it. I'm just not going to do it. This river is not this. This is a great Euro river. Missouri is a terrible, in some places. Some places it's really good. I mean, there's no one thing on a river, right? This river is probably, as rivers go, maybe the most consistent nymph river in the planet. Yep. I mean, you can basically go 60, 70 miles in this river and have great nymph water. Mm. Now, conversely, you go into the dry fly world and you want to go fish a hatch. Well, this river, you'd have to completely change your style as opposed to the Missouri. The Missouri, longer leaders, longer drifts, small flies, set up potted fish that you better have your A game when you run up there. Here, very short windows of opportunity, much less inspection time on a free stoner that's where it's all broke up and the water's going. Maybe not quite as exacting of flies frequently. Don't ever, whenever someone says something like that, don't take it as gospel that it's always that way. You can be very technical on this river. You can have technical hatches. I'm not saying that, I'm just overview. For the most part though, on fast water, your fish are making a move. They're sitting beside this rock. Maybe it's sitting right here and it's just pushing out. Maybe it's on the cushion, it's going both sides of it and it's like, I got one here, got here. They got to look. On the Missouri or on the Henry's Fork, the ranch proper, something like that, those fish might have a 6-8 foot of inspection time. And trust me, you go to those rivers, they will give you all 8 feet. And you will, come on, eat that thing, would you?
That backslide.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't think you have one tail enough. No. And here, so, you set your systems up shorter leaders here. It's just.
I think that goes along with that too, right, is inspection time. There's an inverse relationship between the speed of water and the size of tippet that you need to use. Like on the mow, you're going to drop down to 5, maybe 6x.
Sure.
Here, a lot of the time, you can get away with 3.
Yeah, all day.
Yep.
And using the same size flies. I mean, like Jeremy used to say, if I can get the leader through it, that's what I use, through the eye.
Yeah.
And
people are shocked by that when they come out here and they've got a size 18 or a 20 nymph or
and you got
fly.
4x on it or 3x maybe.
I go 4 because I can't get 3 through.
Yeah. So there you are. And they'll eat because it's like it's a necessity. They have to move much quicker. Now there's places where there's plenty of places where you can go out and they don't play that game. And they're slower, like we were talking about some of those nymph runs earlier. Where they condense up. But so that's understanding your style. I mean, it's hard to, it's like anything, you adapt, you're going to fish. I'm going to fish the Henry's Fork. I'm not thinking about dropping nymphs. If I am, I'm going to drop one under a dry fly, right? And I'm going to have as stealthy of an approach as I can. When I go to a river like here, which is broken water, I'm going to be fishing much shorter. I'm going to try to get on top of my fish. I had somebody in one time talking about fishing 25-foot leaders on this river, like it was a badge of honor. So it's a badge of stupidity. I mean, that is absolutely stupid. Your leader's going to get sucked underwater so fast, like they were getting a better dry fly drift. That is such bullshit. Well, that fly's good. Yeah, I know. You don't have to say it. I know exactly what you're going to say. What? Consider the source is what you're going to say. And so tell me if I'm right. I know. You want to kill them. So, but at any rate, the leaders get sucked under here. I mean, you don't get 20 foot of drift. I mean, there's a spot or two in the river that do that. But you've got, for the most part, you're probably looking at a great run. There's maybe 2 or 3 that I can think of where you could get a 10-foot drift. And even then you're going to get some of this convergent seam thing, which grabbing your leader, and this one's up here, current's nice here, and even there it's going to have a little fold, and that part of your leader goes underwater, and it's just, it's really hard to make a comparison on the two. And then you get to the Missouri, and in a boat, you could have a 40-foot drift.
Oh, yeah.
And never even, if you're really good, you probably get almost indefinite.
Yeah, theoretically, you might be able to go all day.
It's
if
like
your rower's real good and you're on it.
Everything's great in the world. So you've got to contrast. And then it's really tough to say that in a broad spectrum of river because spring, summer, fall, right on through. And so contrasting, I would say I would first figure out how I was going to fish. And like with streamers, it's not as big a deal. I'm just going to set up for my 4-H bases, and that's one thing. But I don't think it's as critical in streamer world to do your research as far as I can fish. If I'm in a boat, I can do whatever I want. And the water's going to come to me as holding water only. I don't have to think about getting a drift, I don't have to think about dry fly versus nymph. But so, the original question was kind of how do your tactics change? Well, every river is completely different. And every style, I mean, we tend to talk a lot about streamers, but I would prefer to go actually run a hatch and just, then I ought to know, I guess the critical things are like how deep's the river, can you wade it, how long's the rod? That's a big start. Like I did that one video where I took out the old Fenwick and I took it up in water. I should have had a 10'5" weight, and I could have made a cast without trying to drown myself and shit like that. I might even landed one. But that'd be the first. Like if you're on the Missouri, which is a big, large, giant, placid river, very glassy surface for the most part, or you come here. So up there, I might want a longer rod, longer tippet, or leader, leaner tippet, And when I go here, maybe I'm going to be looking at a 20-foot cast, shorter leaders, 9s being max. Maybe I fish 7.5s a lot here. Depending on the size of the bug, a little bit. Mostly it's going to be condition related and technique. So dry fly, and again, if you're going to run a hatch, you're usually going to start nymphing in the morning, and you're going to want a rod that has the ability to do that. Longer leaders, bobber or hopper dropper. I don't hopper dropper as much. I prefer to do, like if I'm in a nymph fish, I want 2 bugs where the bugs belong.
I know hopper droppers work. Guides love running them. To me, it feels like a shitty way to.
Well, you're not doing either.
Exactly. You're not
kind of dragging,
well.
But on this river with a broken surface, this river I don't mind it. On the South Fork of the Snake, I don't mind it. I got riffle and I got done this stuff. I don't mind it, but I still prefer to have. If I'm nymph fishing, I'm fishing my bugs in the fish's face. Right? I'm not expecting the fish to come up to it. So I put, with a bobber or without a bobber, I naked nymph most of the time anyway, if I can, even in a boat where I can, tight line it. But I want both flies there. I want them, or if I'm single, whatever, single fly, whatever. I want them, I'm expecting the fish to be 6 to 8 inches off the bottom feeding on nymphs like this. And so this river's really shallow. So for a fish to come up here isn't that big of a deal. On the Missouri, where you're going to come up here, it's a lot bigger deal. And so, but again, fishing's very personal. You may think you're the Antichrist for putting on a bobber. And so you got to figure that part out. So it's kind of hard to dissect all. From a streamer perspective, though, it's much easier. Then you just go, I set up for bait fish or crayfish or whatever it is. I always in the spring fish crayfish and leechy stuff, and so it makes it very easy because a river's a river. But dissecting the two, it's so indicative of what your style is. If you're in the old days, it wasn't as hard. Before we started the streamer thing and before all Euro trash shows up and all that, it was like you followed the hatch. You went out in the morning. You probably, back then, way back, you didn't have an indicator at all. If you did, it was a colored tip of your fly line or maybe a short section of some sort of sighter. Euro guys didn't invent sighters. It's been around for a long time. And so but you didn't really necessarily tight line nymph either back then. Some people did, but mostly what they were doing was wading the hatch out. And so you would run maybe a weighted fly in the respect that it was a heavier hook maybe even, or maybe a little lead, and a fly above it. That was really radical actually in the day to have 2 flies on even. And then you would wait for the emergence, and you might swing an emerger. And so on this river, it'd be the same thing. If you went to the Henry's Fork, longer leaders, longer casts, not so much tight here, you could do all that right in front of you because the water surface is so broken, you can stand on them basically and still have it. And then you'd get to the dry fly end of it and you'd match the hatch.
I think another thing on the dry fly end of it is like the approach. You know, you talked about here you can stand on them. There you probably need to be a little bit more wary. But I think the other thing is like a real slick area. If I'm dry fly fishing, I'm not going to cast unless I see a feeding fish or find a fish I can throw at, right? Whereas
and
here you have to prospect more. You got to search for those fish, right?
Even during a hatch.
Right.
Even during a hatch here. And yes, absolutely, where you were on broken water, spring creekies that are fast, you got to go where the fish you think they are. And even when they're hatched, even when there's, bugs up. And here, though, on these tailwaters that are fast, it's so easy to miss a fish feeding here. That one we got when the guys were up above and they could see it, I couldn't see that fish on the water. There's a little tiny wave train here, fish is feeding here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm down, maybe if I was Johnny's height, I might have been able to see over that little tiny wave. I don't know, it wasn't really a wave, it was kind of a hump. But he's just...
it was weird sun angle, so you're dealing with a little bit of glare there.
I never did. When they called it out, I never really... I was still looking where I thought the fish was.
I remember because we were up on the hill. If anybody hasn't seen this, go watch it. It was fun. I think it was a fun scenario where we're filming an instructional video and two guys walk up the bank. Yeah. And I'm standing up on top of the platform up there, and they
30 feet up.
Yeah, and they go,
at least.
"Hey, is that
maybe
Kelly Gallen?"
40.
I'm like, yeah, it is. We're filming this thing. We're chatting with them, and all of a sudden, or I guess we chat for a little while. They watch, and then they take off up the bank, and then they go, "Hey, there's brown trout feeding up here." Actually, they said there was a rainbow. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a brown.
Might have been two.
Yeah, there could have been. So they spotted this fish for Kelly. Kelly makes a number of casts at it. It was a weird.
I wasn't getting where they were. I really didn't understand where the fish was.
There's some miscommunication, which was likely on my part. And then, finally, I think you saw it chase it out once, right?
Yeah, he came an extra foot or two up to get it.
Rolled down around and I think rejected and went back up. And then the time he actually ate it, he did turn around, follow it, eat.
Yeah.
And you saw that one.
Yes, we got that.
Yeah.
That was a good fish. But yeah, that's back to that. It's just a... I guess that the short answer on this is I don't do anything different for any of them. Other than my gear, how I would set up for the gear, because I'm going to fish a specific style, on occasion, I will go and just do one thing, but I'm going to go, I will almost always have a streamer rig, even if I'm going to, like when we were down with Stenerson. We started the morning, we could have prospected, we could have run, fishing spinners from the day before looking for that, or just that fish that's set up. But I usually go for specifics. I'm going to go chase big fish with a streamer and then set up and wait for that dry fly to happen. And that's what I dig. I mean, if I could do anything, that's how I would do it. And or go for this dry fly and post spinner fall, streamer fish out, something like that. But it would be essentially all the same thing between if I'm going to a freestone, if I'm going to go to a little creek, I'm going to already know my style when I go there and then adapt to it. Like we'll go to one of these little creeks and that there's, it's fall, you're going to go fish terrestrials, you're going to, it's late summer, And by the way, terrestrials is not, I hear this a lot. Terrestrials are not a hatch. They're not a, people say are the hoppers out yet. Hoppers are here in May. Ants are here. There's ants out in the snow right now. Yep. And so they're always here, but what makes, so this one, when you're thinking about hatch fishing or topwater fishing, the thing about terrestrial season is usually you've run out of your day mayflies and most of your caddis. You'll have evening stuff, but you won't have your day. And what it does is
those bugs are done hatching for the year.
Yes, they're done. And they may, you could still have bugs in that, but for the most part, terrestrial fishing is simply the fact that and you have to understand this, that it's generally that they've set up to the edge because that's the last, there's nothing left for them to look at in the mid-current. Mm-hmm. So they'll edge out in the fall because the only potential they have at that point is something getting thrown in the river. Hoppers seldom hit water. They have claspers. They grab on in windy days. When you'll really see them is in agricultural areas when they mow.
When they do the cuts.
God, that's the greatest.
Crazy.
But I mean, and also they fly and get thrown in too. But they're looking, they edge out to knowing that their food is coming from land base. Mm-hmm. And so it's just the time of year. There's nothing left down here for them. If the bugs aren't emerging and not moving through the water, there's nothing to eat. So they slide out to the edge. So it's more like fall, late summer, you go looking for that and you don't maybe pack all your mayflies with you and you have a generic this or that, but you'll go in anticipation. So I don't know, it's almost like you just got to homework it and pick a style and go die with it. Yeah. Or two.
And do you think there's any major differences in approach between small water and large water across any of these disciplines?
Not as much as we'd like to think, really.
I mean, the old saying is, when you're struggling with large water, make it small.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what I said earlier, last times, was that this river in particular, I tell people it's 10 feet wide and the rest is scenic value. Mm-hmm. Break your water down tight, break it into a creek. And especially people come from the east and like, oh, wow. And they're looking at it, I go, where do you live? Wisconsin. Pretend it's the route. Or Minnesota. Pretend it's trout run. Just pretend it's that size.
Yep.
And the rest of it, just look for mermaids. Don't fish. Just go and fish and break your water down. Mm-hmm. So that's not true anymore. Most people start fishing on smaller rivers, right? Or creeks. And so creeks are just micro rivers. But we don't have trouble reading a creek because it's right there in front of us, mostly because we're not distracted by the other shit that's out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many times you walk out here and see people hucking those 40-foot casts into that raging whitewater and you go, that's all they get.
Pretty quick drift.
Yeah, and so you just break your water down. But yeah, make your river small, no matter where you are. And if you're on the Missouri or the White River or the Yellowstone, the big Manistee in Michigan, the Farmington out east, I don't care if you're in a boat or not, break the damn thing into a little tiny piece of water. You always do that. You break it into, if you're doing this in my boat, somebody's going to talk to you. We're not fishing that side. We're right here. So you don't need to look at that other shit. You need to look at this shit right here. And so if you'll break your water, and including lakes, if you will break your water into tiny pieces, life gets very easy for you because you're not distracted by the other stuff and you're not missing the rise form that started that you've already missed because you're too busy looking around. Because once they're up, but it's those little, but the difference between really great anglers and average anglers is their ability to break the river quickly and break not only the river itself, but what's happening in the river. Maybe that 10 to 20 minutes of pre-hatch when your betas are riding in this film and the heads aren't popping through the water, but yet you're seeing the nose, and you put what's supposed to be on when it's supposed to be on. Mm-hmm. And so that 10 to 15 minutes of 3 or 4 fish is the difference between, well, now the bugs are up, and then you follow the bugs, and then, like my book, Cripples and Spinners, I talk about, it's not just about the spinner, it's about the post spinners when they go underwater, when they're dead. Well, we miss that part. And so the angler that follows all that through capitalizes, and I speak about bass fishing all the time. I was just watching the heavy hitter, I can't remember what it was, but the average bass tournament of the best anglers in the world in the old days, I don't know how, I haven't really looked at the stats for quite a while, The average tournament's won by 13 ounces. That may be the difference between 300,000 and 80,000.
Right.
13 ounces. So that tells you that the best of the best of the best are only fishing for a few ounces or of fish.
Yeah.
And so at the end of a day for us, you know, if 3 fish is good for you, great, you've had a great day. If your expectation is 7 fish, that's what I just talked about.
Right.
That's that 1 or 2 fish pre-hatch where they're snooting and not eating. And it's knowing that they're not on that dun that you're riding for an extra 25 minutes because you can see. I hear that in this fly shop 20 times a day. I can't see that thing. No shit, nobody else can either. You just got to learn to track your fly. Yep. Or put a tractor fly that you can see and fish another one a foot below it, whatever it is. But the difference between if 7's your day and 3 doesn't cut it, then it's your ability to put those 3 or 4 fish in the non-hatch up. Here's my wing. Can you see me? Yeah, I can see. Okay. I'm down in the water and it's invisible. Well, it's invisible for everybody.
Yeah.
Figure it out. Mm-hmm. Mark your leader. Put a piece of, Gary LaFontaine used to do that. He'd take white and put it on his leader, foot above his fly, or 2, whatever, and he could see his leader. Well, you seldom see the fish. A snooting fish that's barely just plucking, when he's doing this, can be, and this river, shit. Yeah. I mean, it's almost impossible. So that's the difference in, great and average. And then, so that's how you meet your expectation. So that has nothing to do with the original question. But it does get back to the fact that there's not that much difference in how you're going to set up for the other things. The crick is the crick, closer, probably, depends. You're over on the Ruby where it can be really really bumpy and like that, or on one of the spring creeks where it's just doing this shit and they're getting a 30-footing. I've had fish on Armstrongs follow my fly 20 feet and take it. Yeah. I've had them follow it 20 feet and just look you in the eye and go, sorry, nice job, cracker. Beat it.
So another tip, I think, that when you can't see your fly, whether you're fishing a spinner fall, it's late, light's going low, or you're throwing 22s and you're just having trouble seeing them. Like sometimes a Griffith's gnat is pretty hard to see in the water, given that it's dark on a cloudy day. What helped me was really fishing short and trying to understand where my fly was rolling out to. And instead of trying to track my fly in the air, look at the spot I'm trying to cast to, and then basically try to follow the water down. And basically guessing where my fly is.
And don't worry about seeing your fly.
Yes. Look for a fish. Yeah. If a fish eats in there, try setting up.
Yeah, you can track it pretty well. I mean, y'all have heard this 100 times from me. I don't get to fish during the day that much. I mean, more nowadays, but in the old days, I never got to fish in the day. But I don't miss many nights. Yeah. I never can see my fly. I'll tell you one other trick with that is other than the first 20 minutes of a spinner fall, I never do anything but a single spinner. I love that challenge because you cannot see it. I don't care who you are. If you're 6'8", you might get an angle refracted, but I mean, spinner falls generally come with lower light. I mean, there's a few day ones that happen, but light's usually glassy or in your face. It's like, oh shit, right? Can't see anything. Trico spinners can be that way, but they show up pretty well. But other than that, on free stones, this is just a basic tip. After the spinner fall is complete, or if I'm fishing caddis, I run a sunk 6 inches behind my adult. If it's a spinner, I run a sunk spinner that far. I fish a double caddis, always period, end of discussion. I mean, I'll run a drowned caddis, 16 or 18, behind every dry caddis if they're egg laying. Mm-hmm. When they're hatching, you can do the same thing because they can look like they're coming up. But that's just a simple add-on trick. But again, back to the original question, just break it down small and decide your style. Yep. I mean, I don't think there's really super tips or tricks to how you would compare them. Although I do like to find out, I'm always amazed when people get to a river and they don't have a clue what's hatching. If you're, in the old days, we would call it fly fishing. We meant dry flies.
Yes.
And the rest of it was kind of a subspecies. In particular, those assholes that did streamers. We were a real subspecies. But in the traditional fashion of going dry fly or fishing a fly without weight, without streamers and sinking lines, and we get a lot of that here, not knowing your bugs, which is okay. You can always go to the shop and ask, but sometimes it pays to prep that a little bit.
No doubt.
Mostly because show up here and realize you're not going to be fishing when the hatch is here. What? They don't go all day? Well, not many. Those nocturnal stones, they don't really hatch in the middle of the day.
Yeah, that thing's
nocturnal for a reason.
It's done by 6 a.m.
Yeah. If you're lucky, you get a memory until 7.
Yeah.
Lucky,
All right.
but
Well, you got anything else to add?
no, I'm not sure what we were talking about.
I don't really remember either. This
that
one's
was a
going to be
total
tough
ramble.
to find a title for. So,
Rambling.
thanks for watching.
Bands I like, Allman Brothers, Rambling Man. I thought about having that music thing every time, having one band that I liked.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. We'll add
But
that
some
in.
guy said Train. Littlefoot. I said I already mentioned that one. He was in the comments.
So is Allman Brothers we'll do this. This is a new segment called Bands Kelly Likes.
Yeah. I started with no Rush, no Queen, no Dead. Rush, a little bit. Queen only if it's, or no Queen, I mean. And then Dead was only with Merle Sanders.
Don't worry, guys. I'll
You keep saying that shit.
Yeah,
So I was trying to think of one. Okay. Joe Cocker. Oh,
nice.
love Joe
All right.
Cocker. That's it.
My band of the week
Doesn't
is
count. You didn't grow up enough time.
Legion of Mary.
Oh,
bet
Jesus.
Kelly would
Never
like
even heard of such shit.
Yeah, some of you guys know what it is. Thanks for watching.
Hope you liked it. Send those comments. See ya.